So, okay, so I've done pre-crash. Now I'm going to just do crash and post-crash. I'm going to be super quick. The detail is in there. I will skip slides, and it's all there. And as I say, I'll make it available. I'm just going to pick out some salient points. And at 4 o'clock, it all goes live, and you'll be able to download and entertain yourself all night. I'm going to watch Meghan and Harry. So. All right, now this phase of the crash, we're talking about injury control. So we're talking about the fact that we've we've gone through the chain, and we're now at a point where the crash is inevitable, time to collision so short, you're on your own, it's between you and your God. And then you have your car, and this is about injury dissipation, injury control. It's about nothing else. It's really important to understand that roadside barriers are about energy dissipation and separation. Okay, that's super important to understand. Road infrastructure is critically important at this stage in energy management, right? It's a really subtle but super important point, okay? And the other point about the vehicle is, well, it's up to the vehicle. So, again, basically what I've just said, the crash is imminent, the time to collision short, and you're now up to injury mitigation in the crash. Crash is unavoidable, basically, as I've just said. It's the case for every single crash. There are systems currently available that are pre-safe systems. You can have a Mercedes S-Class, you've got a spare 200 blocking the view of the television. But it does things like it changes your seat orientation and optimises your belt. It emits a high-pitched tone, so it closes your eardrum, so when the airbag goes off, you don't end up deaf. All of these innovations, it changes the ride height on a side impact based on the impending collision, so you're better sitting in your seat. This is about occupant position, and it's about that occupant management. It's super important. So when your seatbelt tightens when you get in the car, that's about positioning. It'll prime the brakes, it'll do all sorts of things. These things are super important, and they need to be in all cars. They're not regulated. Interesting whole story. So we're talking about the crash now, and we're talking about, these are the key points. The ECIS data shows that the level of safety performance based on star rating, also used car safety criteria, point out Stuart and all that great work, is it's really low and it's quite poor. And as I've said to you, we can see the effects of that at high impact speed, and this is what that's all about. We unpack key impact configurations of front, side, rollover, rear, and I'll just throw up some images, and the reason why that's important is because the countermeasures and the crash tests that we do, so in Australian design rules or your ANCAP tests, differ according to the opportunities they provide to make your car safer, specific to those impacts, not whether you've departed the lane, but I'll come to that. Impact speeds are well beyond the engineering safety of the vehicle. I've spoken about that, but I'll just throw up some graphs. Vehicle movements that happen at incompatible angles, so how do we manage road infrastructure to solve that? And how we manage that energy, think roundabouts, think changing or eliminating that crash conflict completely. And then we've got a range of other crashes that I'm not going to talk about. Vehicle incompatibility, so things like heavy mass, high geometry, so think of the importation of Ford Ram vehicles, which are about this high on the bonnet height and as tall as a human. It's madness. Think about that in terms of mass, geometry, and also we've got issues of rigid bull bars being fitted and actually completely negatively impacting the crush profile and safety performance of the vehicle itself. We've got ejection for a whole range of reasons. One of the key things we see here is some of these impacts are so severe that the occupant compartment cell disintegrates under the force of the impact and what it hits. And remarkably, even the narrowest hardwood trees do extraordinary damage because of the focused nature of that. So don't think it's a massive thing that does the damage. In fact, that distributes the load, interestingly enough. And we also have some unfortunate cases of vehicle fire, which lead to fatalities, and that was quite bad. And then we also have multiple impact crashes. So you hit once, then you hit twice, and you often see that at intersections. You have a frontal offset, and the speed is such that the car will spin and then hit a pole or be hit by an oncoming vehicle. And you see it in rural environments where someone's turning off to go onto their property, they'll be hit and then they'll spin and then they'll hit a tree. So these are the sort of things, I'm not going to talk about it in any more detail for that particular configuration, and I'm just going to point out again, Glenferrie Road, that tree is still there. That hill is not great for walking, but the point is this girl was going to work 4:30, landscape gardener, she wanted a coffee, the Macca's was shut, she needed a break, she fell asleep, the momentum took her into the tree, that's the car. Impact speed was only 60 kilometres an hour, but you can see she was really badly beaten up. Young girl. Over here we've got this impact, and then you actually have that situation where the vehicle rolls. Again, you can have a look at the road environment, you can have a look at the car, you can have a look at the speed, and the frontal offset crash test speed for ANCAP, not a regulated one, is 64 kilometres an hour. Look at the impact speeds they're happening at. So they're at or above the actual design speed. And I can tell you, I've sat in rooms with manufacturers, they design to the crash test. That's it. So you're on your own. And that's exactly what we see here. So what I'm sort of saying is the star class matters. We see that there's a change in the injury distribution. We still show that despite the issue of 5-star cars still being at risk because of high impact speeds, they still matter. And it's really, really important to say that. And we can see, and we stop at 2014, 2016, but we see even by year, by star class, they're actually getting better, at least in this case as well. And there's some technicalities about adjusting for this and that. But what we do show is that only a quarter of our cars were 5-star and a third of them had a 3+. And you can actually then see down and it gets worse based on star rating. So star rating matters. But one of the things, and we do still see, is that a large proportion of our fleet are not even 4-star. So they're 3-star or less, half of our fleet. So we've got to have some measures that actually induce vehicle turnover, whatever that looks like. And there's some things in the report to do that, and targeted things like vehicle subsidy or HECS for cars, whatever it looks like. We need to find ways or fleet strategies to turn over the fleet faster because we need the safer cars in the fleet. As I was saying, and we're on a mission here, so impact type matters because it's where you are as a person, as a driver, relative to the impacting object. Side impact, you've got very little space between you and the closing object. Frontal crash is generally more forgiving, but we see here that 68% of our ECIS drivers, so no matter lane departure, rear impact crashes, intersection crashes, 2/3 of our ECIS drivers had a frontal impact of either fully distributed or a narrow offset. That matters because we do not currently test vehicles in a narrow offset configuration like they do in the US. And you often miss the stiff structures and you see the vehicle stripped down the side. We have those, and you see that in that very fast lane departure type crash. We also have side impact crashes, and there's some nuance around that, and rollover crashes. A very high percent. When we did ANSYS, which David Logan and Stuart and Brian Fildes initiated all the years ago, I think I did a rollover report, it was 5%. So we're seeing, for various reasons, a much higher proportion of rollover crashes, and it may be due to the front-wheel drive geometry of new cars or the way they interact with some of the infrastructure, but we need to figure that out because they're disastrous. And rear impact crashes. Now, again, I've listed these tables, they're ugly, they're in the report. The key point is really this. These crashes and the risk factors are basically saying in these configurations, vehicle safety features like airbags are not there. So the vehicle structure is deficient. So when we did ADR 85, the pole side impact test, they put as much effort as putting an airbag in as to choosing the alloys in the B pillar. It's unbelievably technical in how they want to punch you using your shoulder away from the pole. That's the detail. That's what these crash tests give you. So what we want to do, in our view, and what the data supports, is to have an expanded test battery for all these different impact configurations to aggressively, and I'll say this because it's Canberra, we need to really aggressively promote and uptake advanced vehicle regulations that are common in the US and common in Europe, which we do not do. And it slows down the penetration of these key safety features in our fleet. Again, rollover protection systems, no rollover crash test in this country. Rear impact crash test doesn't exist in this country. Extraordinary. So rear impacts in the US are associated with fuel leaking. Now we've fixed that problem through other design rules, but you still have the problem of the rear seat occupant and very high speed impacts at intersections. It's not designed for. Quite extraordinary. So we clearly say these are the sort of measures that we can do. This is a really key finding, and I've stated this before, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, despite the fact it's like an epic finding, saying like, you know, 2/3 of crashes occur at impact speeds above the ability of the vehicle to protect people, even 41% or so, I think it is, off the top of my head. Where's it gone? For, yeah, 5-star cars. So the issue then becomes is, well, what happens if how do we manage this? Well, you can reduce the speed limit, because what we want to do is reduce the impact speed. Remember those relationships that ECIS data has clearly demonstrated? What we need is a reduction in impact speed. I don't care how we do it. We can do A, B, we can do a range of other things, but that's important. We can replace 4-star cars, everything below that's not a 5-star car, but we still have a problem that even if every car was 5-star, 22% of the crashes and cars in it would be beyond the design spec of the vehicle to protect the person. So even with the best fleet, the way our system's currently designed and operated, we're still not helping even compliant drivers. It points to a course of action that's challenging, but also very important. And this is stuck. Okay, lane departure crashes. There are a whole range of things, that infrastructure measures that we point to in this report that really promote that, but we also, in terms of energy management, and again, barrier installation in appropriate places, and we have gone through every single road environment and said, is it even feasible to put a barrier there based on the topography and lane width? And for those, you've got no choice. You've got to drop the speed limit. The numbers are in there. So I think these are the sort of things that we see. Centre barriers, because we have cars that do this. When you're drunk and off your face, you're going left, you're going right, you're hoping for the best, and you end up somewhere. That's unbelievable. So, you know, sometimes we need to just do the road properly in terms of that energy management barrier control system. It helps the person coming the other way, but the key point is about energy dissipation and management. Again, energy dissipation management. You saw what happens when even a 1-star car, which was a good car back in the day, a few friends who had Commodores, they were very proud when it was new. You see what happens even when it hits a post at 61 kilometres an hour with that momentum behind it. So where we tree planting policies, you know, we've got to have that discussion around tree placement and what they look like and road widths and all of that sort of stuff. These are the sort of challenging countermeasures that we've actually looked at. And I think, did I go too fast? Never gone too fast, Michael. So one of the things with intersections is really clear. We have classified all of our crashes according to intersection crash subtypes. This is about vehicle movement, and this is about exposure to the oncoming object that is going to hit you or you are going to hit. So a vehicle entering the carriageway, we saw an example of that, and we saw those right turn across a 100k road. How do we manage that? Well, you can shut the intersection, but you can also do things like speed limit reductions, either permanent or through side road activated systems that slow the traffic temporarily, slows the speed temporarily. So Johnny Perez, who's not here, school graduation, we actually led a paper where we looked at the effect of those, and Sarah from, sorry, last name escapes me, from DOT published or presented some really good evaluation work at a road safety conference on the value of those systems in a rural environment. Again, roundabout installation to change and manage as a speed calming thing, as well as changing the angle of impact. Summary points really here is this is about energy management. And there are an extensive array of measures, both vehicle and road. Notice the driver has nothing to do with it. The thing that the driver is sometimes they're frail, so they're more likely to be injured, right? So older drivers or people who are shorter stature, so they're out of designed position. There are no female crash test dummies properly, so things like that. But really, all I'm saying here is that these crashes were so severe that people were trapped. and they required difficult extrication, and there were delays to notification because they were off in the bushes or they were on rural roads where there was no passing traffic. Things like e-call become really important in these kind of measures and become super critical, as well as really robust resourcing and training of ambulance and a provision of helicopters, because we need to get these people to definitive care at the Alfred or the Melbourne or other trauma centres according to proper transfer triage protocols. And I can talk about that for a long time, but I won't. Really critical because time is everything, and we saw that there were quite clear constraints based on delays in notification, nothing to do with call takers, everything to do with the fact that they were rural, isolated crashes, and we see that too often. In terms, and then there's resourcing of emergency care and so on at the hospitals. In terms of rehab recovery, we had people going to rehab, we had people going to acute spinal services, traumatic brain injury services. They all need resourcing and they all need discharge planning to go home and community supports, because that's how we have to manage people's long-term physical injuries and their road to recovery, which is the title of my thesis, and also as well as their mental health, and the TAC has a role to play with that. Layered on top of that, you've got the stress of police investigations potentially, you've got return to driving and your car insurances. The last thing I will say is crash data systems. These are also very important. We saw that we had very limited access to EDR. Sam Duke's done some great work on that, of collecting that data. Why it's important is because it gives us an objective basis to what happened prior to the crash, like the aircraft black box. The final points I'm going to make are these. ECIS is a massive contribution to road safety in terms of investment, $7.6 million we somehow squeezed out of the TAC, which is an extraordinary investment. The question now is how this data gets used as evidence to drive change. That's exactly what we want to do. We think we've used these crashes to enumerate all the risk factors. We've given options now. Options that can be taken up to show across the crash chain and using a systems approach what to do, and it affects both the driver, the vehicle and the road. That's the reality of the situation. What we've done is actually for the first time operationalised Vision Zero or Safe System. And in terms of we need to act, all this is sort of saying is we need to basically act across the chain at all points, because nothing's 100% effective. Last point, what we actually hope that it informs not just road safety policy but practice. We also think that, or hope that ECIS demonstrates how to implement a systems-based approach from theory into practice using real data collected in Victoria, and it can support the development of new vehicle technologies and also some road safety countermeasures, road infrastructure countermeasures. We give people the confidence and the evidence base is there to sometimes make what could be politically and from a public's perspective difficult decisions. And our hope is the findings are shared widely. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and not bad, almost good. I was talking about timeliness there.